Hey everybody, welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross, and I am joined by a whole lot of friends today. Very excited on this 4th of July Thursday, July 2nd. I came in the office this morning. I actually said, I said to the receptionist, I said, happy Friday. And I legitimately thought it was Friday. I wasn't trying to be funny. I actually thought it was Friday. I'm not working tomorrow. Do any of y'all have work tomorrow? Yes or no? Straw poll?
Nope.
Ben's like, when do I work? No, that's cool. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Let's go around the horn real quick. And today we are discussing the book White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. Discussing this book by Robin DiAngelo, and fantastic book. And that's the book club book of the month. So let's go around the horn and talk to our guests today who are going to unpack this book with me. Anne, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anne Knapp, and I'm the Director of Transportation Services at Global Mobility Solutions. And I've been there for, it'll be 10 years in September.
Well, welcome for being here. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Welcome and thank you for being here. Francine.
Hi, I'm Francine Dreste with VIP Corporate Housing. I've been in real estate and corporate housing together for 25 years. But glad to be here.
Wonderful. And it's so good to see you, Francine. I've gotten to know you in the cannolis in the comments, and it's so nice to
Next time we do this, we need to have cannoli. So we'll figure that out.
Hey, preach. Next, Valencia.
Hi, I'm Valencia Culbreth, Senior Director, Global Account Management with Graebel. I also chair our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. I've been with Graebel since 2007, so really excited to be here, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed our discussion on DE&I, DEI, DE&I, DE plus I. Conversation that we did a couple weeks ago. I appreciate you being a part of that, and thank you for coming back, Valencia.
Yeah, thank you.
Ben Heller.
Hi.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm Ben Heller. I'm with PricePoint, and happy to be here, Ben.
Well, welcome. We got some folks checking in here. Let's see who we got with us today. Jamie Masser, hi, Ben and guest. Cheers from very sunny Mississippi. Hey, Jamie. Molly Feldman, hello from Jacksonville. If you're watching this right now, go ahead and hit that like button. Give our guests a round of digital applause. Hit the little green clappy hands button. I don't know if that's proper, but green clappy hands. Lauren Herring, hello, everyone. Tim Quirk checking in, a big howdy from Western New York, because that's what they say in Rochester all the time. Tasha Johnson, hello from Phoenix. Hey, Tasha. Elena, greetings from Maryland. What's up, Elena? Good to see you. George Meyer, hello, everyone from Corporate Living in New York City. Janet Turner. Ben Heller, long time no see.
Yeah, it's been, what, like a little over 48 hours? Something like that?
I can't get enough. I think you might be the first guest that came back twice in 1 week. And if that's not white privilege, I don't know what is. Hello from California Bay Area, Drew Phillips. Oh, man, we're already having a good time today. Jill Partega, hello from Michigan. Hey, Jill, it's good to see you. Anyway, I'm having some fun because I think this is obviously a tough book. I mean, it says it in the title, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. And it was tough. I wanted to know what was your preconceived notion about the book before you started it. What was your first reaction? And I just kind of want to go around the horn and just touch base with everybody. What was your first reaction before you started this book, Anne?
I figured it was going to be a hard book to read because, as we've discussed, it says so in the subtitle. But I was really looking forward to reading it. I think part of what everybody's trying to do is educate themselves and be better. And so I knew it was going to be hard, and it was going to be challenging, and it was going to be uncomfortable. But I also figured that it was going to be really important. And it was really important and very impactful.
Francine, what were your thoughts before you read the book?
At first, Ben, I actually thought I wouldn't relate to it because I'm like, oh my gosh, gosh, looking at the title, I'm like, how does this, I would just really, it was like, I just didn't think, okay, I'll read this because this is something that's really important. But it totally spoke to me, and I was really humbled reading it. I was humbled and grateful and really eye-opening in a lot of ways, and totally, completely makes sense.
Yeah, I feel you on that, right? Yeah. Valencia, what was your thoughts before reading the book?
Sure. I thought the book was going to be more around how white people understand racism and more of just the education on racism, rather than understanding how the systems and structures and how the racialized identities and those types of things that help lend in and uphold and perpetuate racism. So it went a whole lot deeper than I thought it was going to go. And yeah, it was really very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. A lot deeper, and therefore more convicting, I think, than I thought it was going to be. Ben, what was your take? I mean, we had a conversation about this.
So my wife bought this book as, I think, a reaction to the Black Lives Matter movement that's happening, and she's educating herself. And she put it on the kitchen table, and it bothered me. It made me uncomfortable. I didn't like it there. I had really strong reactions to it. And while she wasn't there, I put it in the dining room. And then I walked by it the next day, and I had the same sort of reaction to it. And it was weird. It's not a normal reaction to have to a book. And I actually turned the book over. And then I went about it, and then I saw it on your show. And like, you had it in the background.
It was haunting you. This book, you couldn't get rid of this book.
And like, when I saw it on your show, I was like, okay, if it's good enough for Ben Cross, why am I feeling this way? What is it about this book that is making me have such a visceral reaction to it? And I started reading it, and it is uncomfortable. It's not a fun book, but like, it's actually a pretty approachable book. And what I was looking for was really to understand why I felt the way I did to this book. And I got that. And I got a lot out of reading this book. And then on Monday, after the show, you asked me to come on this. And I had the same reaction again. Like, I didn't want to be here. I don't want to come on this show. I don't want to talk about race. I don't enjoy this. It's not a comfortable thing. And I went on a run, and I thought, you know what, like, maybe my reaction to the book is very similar to others. I certainly got something out of it. Maybe others would too. And I thought about like the fears that I had in coming on the show. What if I say something wrong? What if I offend someone? Like, we all have clients in this industry. They all have different worldviews. What if I don't say the right thing? And I felt that same fear. It was different, but it was really similar to the fear that I had in just opening the book and it being on our kitchen table. And I felt, you know what? I think that I need to overcome that and need to have that conversation, and because maybe others are feeling the same way. And I'm glad I did. It's I learned a lot about myself reading this book. And like, the uncomfort that I had in the beginning subsided over time to the point where I could actually absorb the information and learn a little bit more about myself and racism, and hopefully walk away a more knowledgeable person.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Ben. I think that's super honest, and I think we felt degrees of that. I think all of us probably felt degrees of that as we read it. There's a part of this book about naming whiteness, and calling it a thing. Oftentimes we as white people talk about blackness, or we talk about black people or brown people, or fill in the blank people, but we don't talk about white people. We don't name white people as a race. Instead, we look at the world from our perspective, as white people's perspective. And so, how is your views? And this is really out to everyone. How have your views of whiteness been changed and impacted by this book? Anne, if you open your mouth, I'm going to call on you. That's
I
it.
was taking a breath.
I
They've been expanded, I guess is the best way to put it. You know, they talk in the book a lot about individualism and not the group. And I think that part of the problem with white fragility, as she basically talks about, is that we individualize it, right? And so I'm not a racist. I'm not, you know, whatever the excuse is, right? Whatever the reason is, the good, bad, binary, whatnot. We think about it very smallly and very individually, and we need to look at whiteness and its tentacles and how it's in everything. And I guess I just look at it. I don't know how else.
Yeah.
I have had trouble in reading this book really verbalizing and processing what I'm feeling. I mean, there's not a page in here that doesn't have a highlight mark on it, right? There is rarely a page that goes by where I don't say, holy crap, and reread a section, right? This book is 154 pages, and it took me almost a month to read because I kept rereading things. And it's so impactful, everything that she writes about. It's very hard for people, and this is my problem, and this is the problem with a lot of white people, is that we were unaware for no other reason than our own unawareness and lack of education about what's going on. And so I have continuously had a problem verbalizing what my brain is thinking because it's so big. Everything is so big, and it should be. It's a big, important topic. And so I guess as far as understanding whiteness or talking about whiteness, I would just say that it's expanded my view of it and how insidious it is, if that's the proper word to use.
Pervasive, insidious, I think is a great,
pervasive,
intrusive. But I mean, is it that our own lack of education, or because we weren't educated, or we chose not to see it? You know,
well, I think it's both. It's both. I think when you're a kid, you go along with the education that the school system is giving you, right? The whitewashed version of American history or world history, whatever, you know, the civil rights movement. You know, hey, here's Roots. Watch that. It explains everything. It's not the case. Like, it's not the case, but we don't pay attention to it if we don't have to or we don't want to post school. Or I think that's the way a lot of people feel, is that they're just, I'm done with my education on history. Like, we had a chapter on the civil rights movement. I know about Rosa Parks. I know about MLK.
Right.
You know, and we don't pay attention to the resources that are out there. And in addition to this book, I think a lot of people are looking at other things too, and seeing all of the things that we haven't taken advantage of. There are a ton of books and podcasts and videos to watch, and we cannot blame Black people for our lack of education. It's out there to receive,
right?
And we have chosen not to.
And part of this book also is like, we can't expect Black people to educate us.
Absolutely.
Right? We have to
100%.
take responsibility for our own education. You know,
yes.
It's like come tutor me on racism. Like, no, it's not that's not their job. You know what I mean? Like,
and there are, and she talks about it.
We created. This is I'm sorry. Right. I want to talk real quick.
Yeah, go.
It was like they were like, this is a problem that was created by white people. Mm-hmm. And now we're asking Black people who are victims of this system that white people created to help us understand it and fix our mentality. And it's like such a perverse request, you know. Francine, I wanted to give you an opportunity real quick to share what was one of your, like, maybe a blind spot or like a thing that just kind of jumped off the page and was like, what? Like, what is, like, what?
Since George Floyd, since that happened, my eyes were completely open to a lot of things, and the movement of all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter. And I finally started to dig in and understand. And in conversations that I've had with people, whether they were white people or people of color, I would find myself getting defensive, and I would find other people getting defensive. And we couldn't find common ground to talk through, to get to the root of the foundation of the problem, or what we could figure out together. And this book really just opened my eyes to understand, like, hey, why those conversations were happening, or why I thought the way that I did, why some of the way I was thinking was completely, not accurate and totally false. And it's really helped me educate myself and to disarm and lean in and understand and figure out and help. And through this process, I've been, trying to have conversations with friends and family, and it's been really interesting, but really rewarding because this is, it's going to take all of us really to make a change and make an impact.
I love it. I love it. And if we're getting some great comments here also. So if you're watching this and you have a feeling or a thought or a question, feel free to leave it there, and we'll try to work that in right now. I appreciate some of the wonderful empathy that's going on here in the comments. Valencia, I wanted to ask you kind of the same question. Was there something that jumped off the page at you when you read this, or one of, pick one, right? I mean, what jumped off the page?
So for me, it's really the whole concept of whiteness, and I'll go back to that word that you had asked Anne about. Understanding that whiteness doesn't live within just white people, right? It lives within the systems, it lives within our laws, it lives within our education, it lives within our neighborhoods and how we navigate space, all of us, right? And so for me, reading this book was so validating in my experiences that I have as a Black female when I navigate life through whiteness, right? And what does that look like in my job? What does that look like, in my school and in my education, with my neighbors, and having conversations about race growing up is something we always did. So it wasn't a hard subject or hard to talk about. It's something we did within our family. So trying to talk to white people about race and racism, and being met with some of the pieces of fragility that you learn about in the book was eye-opening, that I can now name some of these things, right? Now I understand what's happening when the defensive begins, or white tears start to flow, right? Or people start to retract or get angry. So it was really, really clarifying for me that I can name it, I can now speak about it, and I can also approach white people knowing some of the triggers that might happen, but then I'm more prepared to lean into that conversation, knowing what the responses might be.
Yeah, she, the author, I guess, has speaks to companies and does trainings on these things, and talks in the book about some of her experiences in kind of the classroom environment, or the corporate auditorium, perhaps, and the reactions that she predictably gets, and when she says she predictably gets the reactions, I know exactly what she's talking about. I think we've all been in that room before, right? And this corporate auditorium might as well be my living room sometimes at home, right? Or when I'm at a family function or whatever, right? And we start engaging with people over these topics, and it brings up a topic I want to talk. And there's so many concepts in here, and I would love for you maybe to each kind of talk about your favorite concept. But one of them that I really liked was white solidarity. And I think it was kind of the concept that, like, us white folks are kind of in this together, and so we can kind of say some things, and we can kind of talk in coded language about how we segregate ourselves and insulate ourselves, and elevate ourselves to a place of superiority. But we can't talk about it because it doesn't really exist. But we kind of know, wink, wink, what the deal is, and we talk like this, and then maybe somebody comes out and makes a joke or something. It's a bad joke, a racist joke, right? And we have to kind of go along with it, and we can't say no. What was it, Chad? Anyway, no, Tom. We can't talk like that, right? You can't say that, right? Because then it turns back on you, right? And I'm like now the bad guy, right? Or I can't take a joke, or I don't have a sense of humor, or whatever, right? And it's like, or if I'm telling them that they're racist, that now like I'm attacking them, right? And so that was interesting to me, the concept of white solidarity, and I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that concept, and if you've ever been a part of that, or if that rang true with you, just because Valencia was talking about things that just really rang true and like put in words things that we've all felt. That was one of those things for me. Has anybody seen that or have something else like that they want to share?
I think I felt some of that as part of not wanting to come on the show.
Yeah.
Just talking about it is going contrary to that fundamental.
Yes, it feels like we're breaking ranks. Honestly, I feel like I'm breaking ranks by even having this conversation.
Yeah.
The nervousness in even hosting this conversation, the fact that I even feel like I'm being courageous somehow and talking about this, to me is like evidence of white solidarity. Does anybody else feel that way, or am I alone?
No, totally.
Yeah, I think it's valid. I mean, but it also feel really good?
It will when it's over in about 30 minutes. I'll feel amazing, and we'll talk about how great we are and how woke we are, and it'll be super. But like right now, very weird, very awkward still, because I'm like, I don't know. I see all these lovely people in the comments. I see 20 people saying, great job, keep up the good work. But what are the 200 people saying that aren't in the comments? I don't know.
We'll never know.
I hope.
But I think that we should, before we, as we discuss things, like we should talk about how to have those conversations, because like it was difficult for, some of us, like Ben, I totally related to you, like, hey, I'll pick up the book, but, I don't know that I relate to it, but, I feel like my view was completely changed by the book, and I'm totally grateful. And it is my responsibility to educate myself. And then I feel it's like my responsibility to share that with other people too, and to how to have those conversations, how to start those conversations, and what to do when, we're met with the defensiveness and just the different things that happen because, we think that, oh gosh, well, I couldn't be racist because of the things that it talks about in the book. Oh, well, because my best friend is, a person of color, or I work with people of color, or my neighbors are, people of color. Gosh, how could I have those viewpoints? And just, it's like, oh my gosh, there's just so many things to really dive into and really figure out like where your thought processes come from, where your values come from, and how they were established in the first place. So,
yeah, I think the author does a pretty good job of disarming the reader early on in the book, where she frames racism as not acts of prejudice, which I don't know about you guys, but I knew racism was bigger than committing a racist act, but that's sort of where the parameters are. Like if I was called a racist, it's likely because of something I did that caused that. By the way, that hasn't happened, but nonetheless, like the way the author frames it is that that's prejudice. Racism is much more broader than that. It's a complex adaptive system. And she goes on to talk about how she is in fact racist when she walks by 5 young black men in a city, that she has fear associated with that. And it's unconscious, it's learned over time. And she doesn't beat up anyone over that. She's not pointing fingers saying you're wrong, you're racist because of that. It's that this is something that you've learned over your entire lifetime, from the ideologies that we live in, the socializations that we've had, and that you're not wrong for feeling that. But once you learn that, you can address it. And that was something that sort of disarmed me, and I got really early out of the book and I don't know, it opened me up to discussing this a lot more.
Yeah, I would say like in the beginning, and in my open or whatever we're calling it, I figured the book would be uncomfortable, but it was uncomfortable in a different way than I had originally anticipated it would be, because she was disarming. It was really more when you get into the nuts and bolts and the things that she names. That's where the uncomfortability came from. I never felt personally attacked while reading the book. I just felt continuously educated on a really tough topic. Like Ben, you had mentioned that the white solidarity stood out for you. For me, white women's tears stood out for me, and also the rules of engagement were like, I read that like 3 times. Like the first time was like, you got to be kidding me. And then it was like, the more you read, and again with that throughout the whole book, you're like, yeah, I can see where people would be ultra sensitive to these things. And so the rules of engagement were very shocking to me.
Can you define some of those things just for people that haven't read the book, Anne, or just give us some more context?
Sure. So she talks about the rules of engagement of discussing racism with white people, and how we as white people have these unspoken rules in how you are allowed as a person of color to discuss racism with us. And basically it allows white people to defend their actions and dismiss the concern. Like, and the rules were like rife with sarcasm, which I completely react to. I'm a big sarcastic person, like love sarcasm. But like number 9, highlighting my racial privilege invalidates the form of oppression that I experience. Example, classism, sexism, heterosexualism, ageism, ableism, transphobia. We will then need to turn our attention to how you have oppressed me. And it's 11 of those rules. And I think the first rule is like the biggest
Don't
one.
even talk about it.
Yeah, do
Right.
not give me feedback on my racism under any circumstances.
Yeah.
And then rules 2 through 11 are basically, if you break the cardinal rule, which is what she calls number 1, the cardinal rule, then these are the other rules that you must abide by. Or I'm just going to dismiss all of everything that you say, but I'm going to dismiss it regardless because I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
So that for me was like the big, like, we have to be willing to have tough conversations. That's what this whole book is about. That's what a lot of this this general sense of needing to educate ourselves is about. And so those rules were just like right in your face. And I just thought it was really good to read them and work through them and see the hypocrisy in them.
And you also talked about white women's tears.
Yeah.
Could you please elaborate?
Yeah, I will. That was the chapter title that had me the most nervous, as a white woman who cries. And
I love you, Anne.
I'm just gonna be honest. I mean, I cry. And I cried over the murder of George Floyd. And reading that chapter really realized that it's not about me. And it's about the movement. It's about fixing what's wrong and what's been broken and what white people have done. It's also about acknowledging the history of people like Emmett Till, who, when a white woman cries, a black man dies. And that was like, that was a slap in the face, how brutally honest it was put. But it also is very true. And what you have seen, you know, that the woman who accused Emmett Till of flirting with her recanted her story. And
for those of you who don't know Emmett Till was a adolescent young man.
14-year-old.
Mhm.
How old?
14.
14-year-old in Mississippi, I believe.
Yep.
Who was basically hunted down, lynched, and unspeakable crimes done to his body. And it was just you know, just one of many instances. It wasn't an exceptional instance. It was one of many. But anyway, go ahead, Anne.
But I like, you know, again, a tough subject that she handled very well. It was, and she, you know, at the end of the chapter says that, you know, she cries over it, but she's mindful to do it quietly so as not to take attention away from whatever the whoever the real victim is. And then if people really still want to comfort her, she pushes them away. They use the metaphor, it's like firemen showing up at the scene of a car accident and going over to confront the person who caused the accident in the first place. And so that was a really like eye-opening chapter, and I'm glad that she included it because I think that it's important. It's okay to cry, but you just need to be mindful about how you're doing it.
I'd like to further comment on the white tears piece, because for those listening to us, I want, you know, white people or white women, when they cry, it's okay to have sympathy and it's okay to have empathy. So like you said, you cried about or over George Floyd's death. Like that was extremely sad. If people aren't, you know, physically sad about that, that's a whole nother conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The white tears I think she's really focusing on is, hey, Anne, when I talked to you about the comment that you made that really offended me and, you know, is under the umbrella of racism, and your response is to cry, I'm not racist, immediately diverts the attention, right, away from the offense that I'm feeling to now back on you, and I'm just using this as an example. And now it's, I need to make sure you're okay or try to console you around it, right? So I always have looked at white tears as a complete power move. You know, it is not a light thing, right? When you're faced with this and someone starts with the tears, it's a total power move and can change the course of the conversation just like that.
It's like another rule of engagement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it is different to feel sympathy. And for me, I have like this whole process before I get to cry, like internally, like I've recognized it in myself, regardless of what I'm crying over. And it kind of falls in the middle of me processing emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And it precedes anger, right? For me, it comes right before anger. And those things are okay to feel, like you should feel, like you said, there's a whole other conversation. If you're not upset about Ahmaud Arbery and Elijah McClain and George Floyd, if you're not upset about these things, it's a whole separate conversation. But when you weaponize those tears,
Exactly.
that is the problem. And, you know, she was very careful, you know, and how, like I said, she doesn't ever want her tears to be viewed that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's one of those things that maybe I maybe a lot of people haven't thought about. I certainly hadn't ever thought about. But it's important to just be more aware. It's just one more thing to be more aware of in a good way. So
I love that distinction, Valencia, and I think that is a real kind of great nuance and great distinction to make there, where it's one thing to cry with people, it's another thing to cry in defense, in self-defense, or even in offense, right? Yeah, we've got some great comments. I want to get to the good, bad, binary and the spectrum, the concepts of that. We've got some great comments. I want to honor the people that have tuned in and who are taking the time to be a part of this conversation virtually. Gosh, just so many people. I really appreciate you all. Sandra Clary checking in. Hosea Botley from Seattle. What's up, Hosea? Janie Coleman Williamson. Greetings from AHI Corporate Housing Atlanta. Lynn Greenberg from Pivot. Happy 4th. Janet Turner. Shout outs to Ben H. Ben Ho. Thank you very much for your honesty. Yep. Laura Mia Nagazian. Hello from New York. Lynn Griffiths checking in. Gino. Let's see here. Elena. Thanks so much for your honesty and authenticity. Ben Heller. It's okay to be uncomfortable, and it's in our discomfort that we begin to see and feel differently. Joseph Cardini, being humble enough to be vulnerable enough to sincerely curious enough about others. Tim Quirk, Ben Cross, based on your undergrad major, you must have gotten this before. What was it in your life as a white man that helped you see the issues better than other like individual? You know what? I think this is a question that leads into some problematic thinking sometimes, right? So the things that we've done in our past give us a pass for the future, right? Like we've earned, I studied Africana studies in my undergrad, therefore I'm not racist, things like that, right? The fill in the blank, therefore I'm not racist, right? And that's a real trap. It's an intellectual trap. And Tim, while I appreciate your question, I know that's not where you're going with it, but I just wanted to call that out for a second because I think we all fall into this trap as a defense mechanism to justify how we can possibly be racist because we did X. And so to answer your question, what was it like in your life? Yeah, honestly, I think it's just familiarity, I had, I'm just going to tell a very quick story and get back to not making this about myself. But in second grade, I had a teacher, Miss Major. It was a Black woman who was fantastic. One of my favorite teachers in my young life that I ever had. And I had a lot of friends who were, Black and Puerto Rican, Dominican. And I just had a lot of familiarity and there's just a lot of shades in my life, at an early age. And so I had a lot of familiarity. And I think that lack of familiarity is part of what breeds fear and can then therefore manifest itself later in life. So I was fortunate there. And so that's what created a curiosity in me, which then I found an outlet for in college in my studies. And so, and I think in a weird way, I think that familiarity also gave me the courage to break ranks a little bit and do stuff like this. So, I think God, I think I'm a God-fearing man. I think there's a purpose for everything. And I think that kind of paved some of the way for some of this. So thank you, Tim, for the question. Hosea, Ben, don't feel bad as a Black man. I was a little uncomfortable reading this book, but we all must continue to try and understand each other. Great question. Great comment, Hosea. Fernando checking in from Brazil. Alicia, thank you for sharing your honest thoughts on a sensitive topic. I think we're giving voice to a lot of folks right now that are feeling things. And I think, Valencia, you said validate earlier, validated feelings you had. And she did such a way of articulating these feelings and putting them to words, things that I think we've all been feeling and conscious of, but didn't know what it was. And giving language to it was huge. Let's see what Dad says. Dad's checking in. I think part of what you were phrasing, come tutor me, is an attempt to be sensitive to listening to a Black perspective, not so much as shifting that responsibility. I could be wrong, but I think an attitude of listening requires humility and positions Blacks as being an expert of their feelings. Yeah, maybe that's a simple nuance there. I think if you come from a humble place of wanting to listen and understand, I think that's always a great place to start. Where does that thought go off the track? Valencia, I'm going to ask you, as a Black woman, where's that line there, and where does that go wrong?
Yeah, so I'm always looking to educate, right? And that's kind of my internal nature. When it comes to this subject, there's a couple things, and she talks about it in the book. People of color and Black people specifically are willing to educate and want to point white people in the right direction, right? Want to support their understanding, their learning, and a growth mindset. But there are, I think, some rules of engagement around there as well. White people need to be coming from a place where they are willing to do the hard work as well, and not just feed me information and then, okay, I can go about my day. But they're going to research and do the work, and then they're making a commitment to live out that work, right? And so if that's something I see in another white person, 100%, let's get together, let's dialogue, let's lean in together, let's learn from each other. How can I help you and how can you help me? But it definitely goes back to, and I don't know if this was in chapter 2 or chapter 4, but the don't expect people of color to do the work for you. There's a ton of emotional labor that people of color are already carrying, regardless of, current events. This is just an everyday life, right? Like, we're also navigating white spaces and whiteness 24/7. So there's an additional labor of trying to teach our white counterparts.
And follow-up question though, also, I mean, is there an element too where it's kind of reliving some trauma and then a risk that it's not going to be received or it's going to be dismissed?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There has to be a huge level of trust before we're ready to have these conversations, because there is the risk of, I'm going to invalidate your feelings. I'm going to invalidate your experience. And then I get to meaning the white person, gets to shut down the conversation, and then we're done. And then that leaves people of color feeling frustrated, angry, and we have to relive that trauma of, my experiences, my life doesn't have value or enough meaning for anyone else to listen and receive it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you. Hosea, Valencia nailed it. Yep. Casey, the book is White Fragility. Why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. My dad says, here we go. My dad, personally, I have stood up against such jokes since the 60s. I have never heard the phrase white solidarity. Me either. But I have felt ostracized in decades past, not in a long time. However, the not in a long time is interesting, because I think that, racism's still alive and well. So I think it's interesting because they talk in the book about people that used to march, right? The folks like, I used to march back in the 60s, and like, that's cool, but like, what about the last 60 years? Lots happened, lots not happened. What are we doing, right? And so this is a good segue, I think, into the concept of the spectrum and looking at racism as a spectrum, and also looking at the good, bad, binary, and am I misphrasing it? The good, bad, binary?
You got it.
That's right.
I'm looking for validation. I'm very vulnerable right
We'll
now.
validate you on that one.
Thank
Yes.
you so much. All right, cool. All right. Can you guys explain kind of what your thoughts were in those concepts as you understand them, and why they're problematic?
I can take a stab at it. So I reacted pretty strongly to that section, the good, bad binary. If you believe that you're being told that you're a bad person, all the energy, this is a quote that I wrote down, all your energy is likely to go towards denying this possibility and invalidating the messenger, rather than trying to understand why you've said what you've said is what you've done or what you've said is hurtful. And so it's, I think they spend a lot of time talking about this, because I think it's a really important point, that racism is not good or bad, like, or maybe I'm misspeaking here, but like the actions of it. I think I'm out of my.
No, I think that's what they said in the book. Racism is not good or bad, which at first blush you're like, what are you talking about? Racism is not good or bad.
Right.
But it's not inherent. Racism is not an event, right? It's like it's a structure. And I'm going to need some more help here.
That's it.
Yeah,
what was
it's a
that,
structure. It's a structure, not an event.
Thank you. And what does that mean? What's the implication?
It's just not something that happens like once, right? Like it's not, or individually. It's a whole overarching thing.
It's embedded.
It's embedded. Thank you. It's in there. It's in, you know, like I mentioned earlier, the whitewashing of your history, right? Of American history. I didn't learn about a lot of things I should have learned about. It's in medicine. I mean, I don't know if this struck anybody else, but when they talked about the number of medical students who believed that Black people were less sensitive to pain.
Yeah, that was crazy.
That was like from 2016. I was shocked by that. Like that was absurd. And that was taught to them at some point in their lifetimes. And so it's in everything. It's in your education. It's in the stories that get passed down from generation to generation about this happened a long time ago. It's in banking. It's in mortgage lending. It's in politics and redlining. It's everywhere. It is not, and you can't separate one particular instance and say that's the only racist thing, because it is literally in absolutely everything. It's in TV. It's in movies. She talks about The Blind Side and how that, just perpetuates a bunch of stereotypes, right? So
that hit me well too, Anne. I mean, not well, but I love
Talk
that
about
movie.
that, Francine.
Sorry to interrupt. I love that movie, and I'm like, I just, I loved it because of, I love sports, I loved football, and I love the message. But really, when she broke it down to like, hey, why did you love the message? What did you love about it? I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is about, it's talking about the messages of TV and depicting a white family that's rich and a person of color that is not, that is poor, that his mother is on drugs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally didn't see it from that perspective. And it's just really eye-opening to think, hey, the messages that we're, seeing, just like Anne said, in all these different places. So it really opened my eyes to, my thought process and my viewpoint of the movie, and really how our views and values are established by those things.
And Francine, I'm with you on this, right? Because I also really enjoyed that movie, right? And the fact that those didn't jump off the screen at us as stereotypical themes that are racist themes, and that we thought these are normal, plausible, plausible thematic elements of a movie, tells us that like that's how we view, right? That's how we view Blackness and what is probably happening in Black communities, right? And then the whole, and this is a very important thing too, talking about Sandra Bullock's character, right? As a white savior figure, right?
Yeah.
And that is a real problem that we have. The notion that white savior, and that the white people have to save Black people, and that, and just it manifests itself in a lot of ways. But it's also something that I struggle with. Gosh, this book is so layered. It's something that I struggle with because I'm like, I want to be part of the solution, but I don't want to be a white savior, and I don't want to be like, everybody needs me to come along and fix it. You know what I mean? But like, I want to be so. And how do I even work through that, right? And like, help me, or don't help me.
Well,
Go ahead. Yeah.
Right now. I'm like, I don't know.
I think that it's something that I struggle with that too. Like, how do I do that? But the reality is that by assuming you're going to be the one to fix it for an entire race of people is pretty egotistical. It's pretty white privilege, pretty white, supremacist. Black people have established they know what's going on. They know what the issues are. They need us to support them in changing it. And we have to do things like vote. We have to contribute financially. there's a whole bunch of things that we have to do. Yeah, we also have to really fix the system, since, as we established 40 minutes ago, we broke the system. We created this horrible system, but they don't need us to be their saviors. As a whole group of people, they do not need to be saved by us.
Correct.
And that's not what they want. As far as they don't want that. They just want us to support and to stop standing in their way of equality at every level.
But I think, yeah, sorry, and totally, Anne, but I also think that we are part of the solution too, because our thought process, and we need to educate ourselves, and we need to educate other people. So sure, like one person can't, hey, one person can't solve the problem, but one person can, because one person can tell someone else and help educate and help bring people together. So it's all of us. It's up to all of us to help each other and help improve our world. So we all have that responsibility.
For sure.
White people need to save white people. We don't need to save black people.
Thank you. That's perfect.
Each other.
That's what we need to do. We need to save white people and just get out of the way of black people who are trying to do their thing. Valencia, did you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I was just going to respond to, and saying, we got to be a part of the solution, right? So yes, white people have to be a part of the solution because they were initially the ones that created the system. So if you're not a part of the solution, then you continue to perpetuate the problem, right? And it's not about saving one black child, from an impoverished neighborhood. It's about getting active and helping to support and dismantle systems that perpetuate white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's wow. So going back to the idea of I want to go back because I don't think we've really fully unpacked, and I think that this is really important, and I think at the heart of the way people react to this conversation, and that is the idea of the good bad binary. Like you're either a racist or you're not, and if you're a racist, you're bad. And she says that this isn't the right way to look at it. Does anyone feel like they can explain this?
I tried earlier, but I'll try
Does anyone
again.
else feel like they can explain? Just kidding.
I think it's that that if we believe we're bad, like psychologically, it hurts for us to be wrong. It hurts for us to be accused of racism because we are bad, and none of us want to be bad, or very, very few of us want to be bad. And so she's trying to, I think, coach us to react differently, where it's not about good or bad. It's about understanding, being open, trying to change the paradigm so that, thank you for making me aware of this. Now that I have this information, I can process it, reflect on it, and do something more productive, as opposed to avoiding that typical knee-jerk reaction where, someone is attacking me, I am going to go back to them and use the techniques that have been outlined in this book, and we've been talking about, which she defines as white fragility. So I thought that was, Ben, I'm glad you brought it up again because I think it's worth unpacking further.
And I would say that she's also trying to get across the idea that even good people and kind people can be racist, right? So just because if you identify racism within things that either you're doing or you have racist behavior or thoughts, that doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. Historically, people assume racists wear the white hoods and burn crosses in people's yards, right? Or they're involved in lynchings, right? You don't have to be that grotesque in your racism. And then that only qualifies those people as bad, right? And then other people are obviously not racist and good. So she's trying to, interrupt that idea and that binary that exists, because good people can absolutely still be racist.
Yeah,
And
she talks about defensiveness, right? Like that's a big part of this and why the good bad binary exists. And I highlighted this quote. The simplistic idea that racism is limited to individual intentional acts committed by unkind people is at the root of virtually all white defensiveness on this topic. To move beyond defensiveness, we have to let go of this common belief.
yeah, you're right. And going back to Valencia says, I mean, we think racist, we think KKK,
Mhm.
Molotov cocktails, and such, or people that call people the N word and spit on them or something, some ridiculously high bar. I was like, well, and everybody else under that, every 99.9% of other people are not racist at all. It's like, there's just like one or two kooks out there running around, being crazy, it's like, no, it's like, you have to understand this is a part of how we were like raised, of how we were, the system, just the everything, it pervades every part of our society. And if you just disagree or question that premise, read the book. It talks about it a lot deeper, and we're just assuming that premise is understood. So I think there's a lot of people that don't necessarily even agree with that premise, but I would encourage you to read the book and let's discuss. But and therefore we're all racist to some degree. We're all somewhere on the spectrum. We're all at a point in time either acting on it or not acting on it, or supporting it or not supporting it, or allowing it through silence or not allowing it through silence. And I think that we and because we are a part of it and because it pervades everything, it doesn't make us bad people. It's unconscious. It's unconscious bias. And therefore I don't think it makes us bad because we're not deciding, but we are kind of it's ingrained. And so I think the chance to really, I think, be good and be part of the solution is to be aware and to become conscious and to start to counterbalance it and educate ourselves and dismantle it where we find it and where we can. Any other thoughts on that idea?
Very well said.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying. I'm not usually at a loss for words, and this subject really makes me second guess everything that I'm saying. As like, okay, am I going to misspeak? I mean, just the way we teed this up, racist is not good or bad. It's like, well,
Right.
hold on. A month ago, I would have stopped myself, and I would have said, you can't say racist is not bad. Like, what are you talking about? But if you think about it differently, I think it takes a lot of the defensiveness out of the word, and then
the judgment.
Yeah. Wow. Let's read a couple more comments here, and I'd love to hear kind of final thoughts and kind of open it up. And if there's a topic that we really need to touch on before we adjourn, please let us know and bring it up in final thoughts, and when we can make a little bit more time as well. Let's see here. I want to make sure we touch on everybody. Jamie, I'm proud of you for being courageous and opening yourself up for this discussion. Jamie, thanks for tuning in and being a part of it. I appreciate you. Janet Turner, always. Janet, such a great topic. Lisa Baronage, Ben, keep it up. We need this conversation to continue from sunny, beautiful Colorado. Molly says, I think that many people in the world are beginning to understand more than they once did. The amazing acceptance of this book encourages me. Me too. I feel so hopeful. I feel so hopeful right now that we're having conversations like this, that I think this is like the number one book in America right now, which is like number 2. Ben says 2.
Yep. I went to Amazon yesterday to read the reviews of this book, and I was blown away by how many 1-star reviews there are. This book, like the feelings that I had looking at this book, there's a lot of people who have that like strong opposition to it. But it is the second best seller in America right now.
And you wonder if they've even read it, or if they were on some chain mail, like saying, go to this website and give it a 1 star, because there's like this active suppression of this types of conversation.
Yeah, I read a lot of the 1-star reviews to try and understand their position. What didn't they like about this? And I generally saw a lack of openness, a lack of willingness to evaluate themselves. And I get it. Like if I thought I was being attacked, I would screw this thing. And then I watched a bunch of YouTube videos with a lot of views that had just, this is the worst book ever. And there's this, I think the title of the book just elicits a strong reaction. And going through it, I feel like if you're open, there's a lot to learn about yourself. And that, I mean, if the more we know about ourselves, the more we can shape our behavior and become better. But it was really interesting to see how negative some of the reactions out there are.
Yeah, agreed. Naran says, hi, all. Love that you are having this conversation. Dad says, listening is important. Amanda says, cheers from Phoenix. My dad says, I think it's important to make ourselves endure the trauma of reading about Emmett Till's story and looking at the photos to more fully understand the historical trauma of blacks. I believe his mom had an open casket in Chicago.
She did.
Right?
Yeah.
Because she was like, I'm not going to hide this. I'm not sweeping this under the rug, and people need to know. And I think that's one of the reasons that that Emmett Till is known. Wow. Elena says, I appreciate how D'Angelo addressed that so many Americans believe that racism only exists in the Deep South or in rural areas. It is not. Amen. My first issue with police hostility was in Boston. Racism exists everywhere in this country and not just in certain regions or zones. That was a wake-up call for me when I moved to Michigan. You know, I moved from Michigan from North Carolina, and I thought, all right, sweet, north of the Mason-Dixon, back to normalcy. And no, it's wild. Like, it's crazy. Have any of you had that thought, like, that you thought racism was gone, and then it was like, nah, I'm back. Here I am. No. Nobody was as naive.
No, I mean, it's just, I'm from Boston, and unfortunately, I know how people are, and it's disappointing and disgusting, and vile. So I knew that it existed, you know, in the Northeast. It's just because we're not in the Southeast doesn't mean it's not happening. And I certainly see it. You know, you hear about it, and you hear about it more. Thank you to cell phones for shining a spotlight. I watched 2 videos today. One out of Montclair, New Jersey. And
people trying to build a backyard. People trying to build a backyard.
Yeah, she was trying to put a patio in, and Karen next door, Amy or whatever her name was like, "Where's the permit?" And claim that the husband pushed her, and all these neighbors were like, "That's not what happened." And I'm so glad for that. And the other one was, I can't remember where it was, but this white woman, using the N-word to yell at a U.S. paratrooper. And the owner of that building, of that apartment complex, is now working on evicting her because he doesn't want people like her living there. And these things we have heard about for decades, right? But there's something about seeing it that creates a different impression in all of us. And so I'm very grateful for those people who video. I'm not happy that they endure it and they have to go through it. But it helps, I think, a lot of us understand the depth and the severity and unfortunately the commonness of it. And we need to be disturbed by that at a basic human level. Yeah.
There's so many data points, like evidence that we wouldn't have seen 20 years ago. And, it happens once, then twice, then 3 times, maybe a couple bad apples. But the saying is, a couple bad apples ruin the barrel. And like, as you amass a seeming infinite amount of data, you can't ignore that it's real, that there's a real fundamental problem here. And I think what she gets to in this book is that like, part of the solution is looking at yourself and understanding how you react to these things and in your own rate, like your own biases, your own prejudice that you walk into the door with, that's what's been socialized to you over the years. And if you can change yourself, then maybe you can change something else too.
You
Well said,
know,
Ben.
you talk, well, maybe it's just bad apple, right? And it's like, I think to Ann's point too about, the internet aggregates these bad apples in one place, and every day we get a couple new bad apples we get to watch on TMZ or something. And at some point we have to start asking ourselves, what the hell is wrong with this orchard where all these damn bad apples are coming from? Like, what is up with it? And it's not just a one-off, because I think that's been the narrative that white people have created, to say, oh, that's just a one-off. Oh, that didn't really, oh, it's just a one-off. What else happened? What else was going on before the camera started rolling? What else? And it's like, no, there's something wrong with the orchard. Something's rotten in Denmark, to quote Hamlet, I think it was. And so I think we have to really take a look at, what are we feeding these trees, to keep the analogy going. Right. And so, but let me ask you this though, is there something wrong with, because I've also been indulging in quite a bit of this, gawking at the Karens of the world. But is there anything wrong and problematic with this phenomena that we're seeing? With nobody? Okay.
No, what's the phenomenon?
Yeah,
well, the phenomenon with every day there's like 2 or 3 new clips of, some white person acting overtly racist, discriminatory, and either weaponizing their white privilege to call the police, white tears, get knocked out at a Target or something because they were, is there something wrong with how we've kind of the voyeurism and the fetishization maybe of these videos? I don't know, something about it almost doesn't feel right.
You mean, are you saying that us collectively watching these videos of people displaying a strange reaction to race that could be defined as white fragility, like and weaponizing it? Are you saying that there's something wrong with people watching others do that? Or
I feel like it almost, you remember like how the bar was set really high because all we were looking for is people burning crosses and, wearing white hoods. It's like, are we like almost like kind of setting the bar really high again to say, well, hey, I didn't call the cops, and I didn't, call them N-word, and I didn't, pretend that they hit me, but I didn't. But, and are we like missing all this? I guess, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a question.
I think I don't know that it's, I wouldn't call it a new phenomenon, right? Because these things are happening. Mm-hmm. People have just gotten smarter about capturing it because we want it to get out there. We want people to see, because we want to interrupt the idea of colorblindness, right? And post civil rights, there is no racism ideology, right? And so being able to capture this at any level, whether it's they called the police or just shouted at you, or they're telling you what you need to do or what you can't do, or you can't come in, or you're not allowed here. While those have always maybe been passed off as subtle or small, it's like the multiple apples, right? We need everyone to see them all at any level, because that is the reality for people of color every day.
Yeah. I think that, Ben, to your point, like the smaller stuff, the more subtle racism, like when I moved, I live in Rockville Center, Long Island. When we were considering places to live, I looked at Baldwin, and I heard no less than 3 times, "Oh, you don't want to live in Baldwin. It's a bad neighborhood."
Mm-hmm. Code for black neighborhood.
That's right. Like Baldwin's not a bad neighborhood at all. It's actually very similar to Rockville Center, nice houses, just a couple $100,000 less per house. And after hearing it 2-3 times, I didn't even think of it. But that's the subtle stuff that I think that reading this helps you identify. But for sure, the stuff that's flagrant and the Karens, as you describe them, freaking out, that's easy to see. And
yeah, do we like point at them and say, "Oh, Karen, you're so bad," and then we go back to our white neighborhood, and where we post on Facebook? Did anybody see somebody going door to door, selling cable subscriptions? Kind of fishy. Do we go back to our to our life and just act like we're not racist because we're not Karen? I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you, Ben. Go ahead, Ham.
I was going to say that's where the onus gets put back on us, right? We've seen the videos. We saw Ken and Karen in St. Louis with their fingers on the triggers,
Oh my gosh, that was wild.
We've seen it. We watched it probably more than once to try to process the crazy. The onus goes back on us to do something about it, and that's educating and speaking up and participating and that stuff. And if you just watch the video and don't do anything, then you're complicit. Silence is violence, and you have to understand that it's real and it's happening, and that's what the videos are. So I don't think we're setting the bar too high by recording those videos or watching those videos. I think we're lowering the bar and saying, look how pervasive this is. It is happening in every corner of this country. It is happening at multiple different economic levels, right? Like Ken and Karen did not have a small house in St. Louis. It was quite large. So it's just really on us to keep helping to push awareness, and especially awareness amongst white people. Black people know this is a problem. They've always known this is a problem. It's our eyes that are being opened to it. And it's our minds and our hands and our bodies that need to do something to help fix this.
Francine, do you have any thoughts you want to share on the videos or anything that we've been talking about here? How do you feel when you see those? What are your thoughts?
Something needs to change, and just this book and this conversation is great. It's equipping us with how to start the conversation, how to help facilitate change. It really is, because we're white people are defensive. I identified with the defensiveness and earlier in the process and why that happens. And now I can have conversations. I feel like, sure, will most of those folks be close to me to be able to kind of work through that? Yeah, they'll need to have that trust and relationship first. That relatability too, because it is a hard conversation to have with the defensiveness popping up, and just getting through that and helping understand and educate.
Ben, you talked about something, in your, where you're choosing to live, and that resonated with me. I didn't realize how racist I was or had become, or I don't know what happened to me until I bought a house. When I bought a house, I was looking at school districts, driving around the neighborhoods, looking at who lived there, all these things, right? And I'm like, and I was so convinced. I remember this in the moment. I was talking to my wife, and I was like, when did we become old racist white people? Like, when did that happen? What was that moment where I was just like, who lives here? Where is every, what? And I wasn't like, I don't want to live next to someone of color, but I was thinking, I want to live in a neighborhood that looks safe. Well, what is a neighborhood that looks safe? A neighborhood that looks safe looks like a white neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And what does it mean when I want to live in a school district that's a 9 or a 10? Well, it's probably going to be a white neighborhood, and it was that unconscious bias that I like, holy crap, like this is how I'm acting. I'm acting like the people that I say I don't want to be like. What happened? And I use things like, well, I want a good neighborhood and a house that's going to appreciate, and it's going to have a, and all these things. Like, okay, well, what does that mean? Why do you say a house is going to appreciate? Well, what does it mean that Like, what would make it not? So all those things happen. And then a second thing happened where I think I discovered that my son is a racist because my 5-year-old is like, points at like images of black people and thinks that they're inherently bad. And I'm like, well, where did that come from? Right. And why is that? And then I look at, you know, and is it, I'm gonna not take responsibility. I'm gonna say, is it cartoons? Is it because the villain is always dressed in black and the good guy is always dressed in white? And is this what we're portraying? Is it because in his preschool, you know, there's 12 kids and they're all white and he just doesn't know any black kids? Is it because, what is it? What did I do wrong? And Lynn Griffiths actually asked a question. I segued to Lynn's question because I think it's a fantastic question. I appreciate her asking it. She says, thank you for this conversation. You've been discussing that this is a learned behavior, learned over time. So for those of us who are parents, how do we open these conversations to our children? If we are sending them into a broken system, how do we educate the future? Take this down. But how do we help? How do we teach our kids better?
I'll take that one.
Please.
Well, first, you know, I appreciate the ask of that question because we have to teach our children to be anti-racist if anything's ever going to change. So understanding that you have to first educate yourself and then know that there are so many sources out there that support families around conversations around race, racism, and then how to be anti-racist. So it's really getting those pieces of information, learning, and then starting that dialogue and letting your children know that it's okay to talk about race. It's okay to ask questions, but be there with them to help teach them and help them learn so that they can be anti-racist and then they can one day be allies for people of color.
Totally that sounds great, Valencia. And one of the things the books talked about was triggers. And one of the triggers, you know, white people don't talk about race. We don't talk about racism. We don't talk about color. A lot of people say, and I have said this in the past, where I've actually said, I didn't see color. And because I was, you know, hey, I'm treating everyone equally. That is totally what the books talked about. And I've educated myself and I understand what that means to say that. And I've worked through that. So it's just really working through those things and those triggers and having those conversations and having it to be safe and teaching.
Yeah. Actually, someone responded to Anne also with some links here for some books that we can you know buy and resources that we can check out online as well. So I encourage people to read Tasha's post. I really appreciate that. There's some great comments here. I don't know if we're going to necessarily get to all of them, but you know, just a lot of positivity, a lot of people really appreciating the conversation. I wanted to leave some space here for each of you to kind of share kind of a last thought or last idea or last concept maybe that stuck out for you that you think we should hear. And I'll go around the horn. Anne?
You know, this book was very powerful. You know, we really touched on a lot of the things that struck out the most. However, there was one I'm looking for it. I have it written down. Sorry, hold on.
Please.
There was one moment in the book where a black man was asked what it would be like for white people to be open to feedback. And he replied, it would be revolutionary. I had to put the book down and walk away to really give that the credit that it deserved, the power that it deserved. Just for us to be open to feedback would be revolutionary. That's very powerful. I took a lot from that. And this, for me personally, is the beginning of my journey. I have other books sitting here that I am going to read. I have books on order. I feel a sense of responsibility for myself, for nobody else, but just for myself, to be a better American, a better ally, a better human. And so the education has to continue. The author talks about how her education continues. And I think that's really important, that this is important work and it's just going to take a while. But when confronted with something you don't want to hear, just listen and be open, because apparently it's something that doesn't come along often enough, and we have to do better at that. So that really was the most powerful thing I read in the book for me.
Thank you, Anne. Appreciate that. Francine, I'd like to give you an opportunity to have a final thought.
I definitely agreed with Anne, and having that man say that it would be revolutionary for white people to accept feedback, be open to feedback, receive feedback, and it really, and this is about this topic, but in general, I can relate to that, and I could explain my background, but that's not what this is about. Why that resonated with me, and that being open, just being open to listen to someone else that has a different viewpoint, and just unpack why we would be defensive, or why I would be defensive toward that, and dig in and learn more and question my values toward that, and why I feel so strongly with it or against it, and really dig in. So that resonated with me.
Thank you, Francine. I appreciate you being here. Ben, would you like to share a final thought?
Overall, this is a book worth reading, and I think everyone in the audience probably should read it. One of the parts that I reacted to pretty strongly was where the book listed all the major people in the world, like 100% of the military leaders are white, and something like 95% of senators or something. I don't remember the exact numbers, but the one that I had the strongest reaction to was teachers. And I thought back to my upbringing, from preschool to elementary school to college and grad school and post. Like, I've never had a black teacher, not one, in my entire life. And that is an experience that, might have changed me a little bit. It might have made me a little more open to black people. But I can't change that. I can't go back and change the teachers that I had, but I can be open to this knowledge. I think that Anne and Francine, you both mentioned that this is like a starting point for you. I think this book made me painfully aware how uneducated about race I am. And I want to do better.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate you sharing that. Valencia, would you finish us off here?
Absolutely. I agree with everyone that this is definitely a book worth reading, regardless of what race and how you identify. One of the big things that I'm super glad that the author touches on in the book is around being colorblind. It's something I hear over and over and over again, and just putting it into the language that she did, and offering the reasoning behind why white people say they're colorblind, or were taught to say they were colorblind. We all know that we see color, but understanding what that really means and how it takes race and racism off the table. If you can't see it, then I don't have to do anything about it. It doesn't exist. So I'm going to sit here and say I'm colorblind, and to start to navigate away from that and not use that as a reason to not engage. And so I really appreciate that she dedicated time to that ideology, to kind of help folks think about why they say that and what that really does to the conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up too, because I forgot to bring that up, and I'm so glad you did, Valencia. And thank you so much for being here. This topic is very near and dear to my heart, and I thought I was a lot better than I am on this. She talks in the book about how progressive white folks can be the worst enemy of this process, because we think we got it all figured out and we think it doesn't apply to us. Meanwhile, we are propping up the same system that serves to oppress, discriminate, limit opportunity, fill in the blank. So this was a real gut check for me. I thought going into this book that we were going to be talking about other people. I thought we're going in this book, we were talking about other white people, and I get to come here and tell all these other white people how they were. I didn't realize they wrote this book about me, So that was definitely convicting on that level. And I think we all have work to do. I think we are all good people, but sometimes we don't make the best decisions. And it's times like that where we choose not to speak up, where we choose to do the easy thing and not the hard thing, when we choose to allow people to stand alone in their times of trouble and vulnerability, and we choose not to stand by them, knowing that they are our fellow human beings. And we choose not to use our insider status as white people to dismantle and be an anti-racist and dismantle the systemic racism in our country. It's when we choose to do nothing or pretend that it doesn't exist, to take people's truth from them, to dismiss them and their history and their experience and their pain and their trauma. And we choose to pretend it doesn't exist because, doesn't affect us or something. I would like to ask that everybody have an open mind and realize this is not an indictment of any of us, but this is an opportunity for all of us. And I would welcome everybody to join us on this journey. None of us are perfect. And I just hope that we continue to strive each day to make better choices and be more aware of where we are and how our actions affect other people. Continue to love people, continue to assume positive intent, and continue to listen. And thank you so much for everybody who chimed in today in the comments and wrote such lovely things. And I even saw growth. People are growing even in the comments from the beginning to the end. And I appreciate Anne, Francine, Ben, Valencia. I love you all. I appreciate you being here and taking this difficult step. And thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Before we adjourn, Janet, I want to talk about our next book club book of the month. There's Janet. Love you, Janet. Fear is My Homeboy, it says. Fear is My Homeboy, How to Slay Doubt, Boss Up, and Succeed on Your Own Terms by Judy Holler. Judy will be with us to talk about this book July 28th. So we will have a similar viewer book club discussion on the 27th of July, and we will have the author on the 28th. There's Francine's got a copy already. And shout out to Francine for suggesting this book and putting us in touch with Judy, who she just raves about. So we're so excited about this book, Fear is My Homeboy. And I'm just really blessed to have this opportunity, this platform to talk about things that are challenging, but will make us better. And thank you all for joining us in this journey. Have a great weekend. Have a safe and happy 4th of July weekend with your family. We are not on tomorrow. We are taking a day off. Janet gets a much deserved day off. She's clapping in the background. I love you, Janet. Thank you for everything you do. Appreciate you being on this journey too. Thanks everybody. Take care of yourselves.